Good evening. This is Bremster, and I'm coming to you tonight with a very different puzzle. This one's going to come with a bit of a backstory, so probably below where I provide the links, I'm also going to provide a time code that you can jump to just to get straight to the rules description and to the solve of the puzzle. Um, so but before you jump to that, I highly recommend just listening to this bit, which is when I do the solve of this puzzle, it is going to be based off a script rather than me actually solving the puzzle. So just be aware of that when you're watching it. And now I'll go into the details of why. But if you wish to just jump straight to the rules description and the solve, then you can do that. So people who've been following my puzzles are probably aware that I came up with the first puzzle I created was a rule set which used psycho killer cages, which were killer cages which had referred digits. So instead of the sum of the cages being the digits placed in the cages, the value that you placed in the cage would point to a different box or a box in the grid, and the cell in the same position in that box is the cell that you would have to use to add to the value of the cage. So that added an interesting twist to the logic, and those puzzles went down very well. And at the same time I was doing that, I also came up with the ideas of possibly doing it with other things than killer cages. And after the Psycho Killer puzzles worked, I spent about 3 weeks trying to make one using thermos using that. And I couldn't make it work. I literally just could not make the rule set work. I tried 3 or 4 different varieties of the puzzles and could not do it. And on the Cracking the Cryptic Discord server, I was chatting to Zombie Hunter about this, and we mentioned that I'd been trying to do it with thermos, and he thought it was a great idea and asked if he could have a crack at it. And I said, absolutely. It's just a rule set. I have no problem with people playing with the rule set. And he came up with a puzzle called the Bremster Thermo Conundrum, which was which explored the concept in a way that I had been doing with my puzzles, and did it quite well. And it was a good puzzle. And then he continued to develop the idea, and I took some of the things that I learned from his puzzle and was trying to make another puzzle. And then he sent me this puzzle called Forecast Heat Wave. And with all of the puzzles that I'd done, I never came up with anything that is as genius as this. I never thought of doing what he has done here to make this work. And this is extraordinary. So he always said that I deserve credit for coming up with the rule set. Sure, fine. I don't think it's, after the Psycho Killer cages, this is not that much of a leap. But what he has done with the rule set is absolutely all his work. And I just wanted to say that while he said that, I came up with it and that's all good. This puzzle is 100% him, and I could not come close to setting this puzzle. I tried different things, but the concept of putting the thermos on top of each other like he has done, I never even thought of it. This is completely him, absolutely off the chart great. And now I'll get on to how this works and why I'll be doing a scripted solve. So the way this puzzle works is it's got 2 standard rules, which are normal Sudoku rules. In every box, in every row, and in every column, the digits 1 to 9 must exist without repetition. On the grey thermos, these are normal thermos, which means digits placed along thermos must strictly increase from the bulb. And then you've got these red thermos. Originally, Zombie Hunter had called these Bremster thermos. My name for them were Heat Map Thermos, and I'm very happy that he decided to adopt that name instead. On Heat Map Thermos, they work very much like the original Psycho Killers. Instead of the digits on these thermos themselves needing to increase, the digits they point to must increase. So on this thermo, for example, and I may break the rules while I do this, this might be an 8, this might be a 3, and this might be a 7. So let's make it a 5, I don't know. So these do not strictly increase. But as long as the digit this points to, let's say this is a 2, and this is and it would have to be, because this is a 3, so it would be pointing to itself, so this would have to be less than 3. And then this digit in box 5 is higher than the 3. Let's make it a 7. This is now met, because this is now going 2, 3, 7, which is strictly increasing along the thermo, because this is pointing to box 8. This is box 1, box 2, box 3, box 4, box 5, box 6, box 7, box 8, box 9. This is pointing to box, and I've done that wrong. This is pointing to box 8. This would have to be the 2. This is pointing to box 8, and this is how easy it is to make mistakes with these puzzles. This is pointing to box 8, and it's pointing to the cell in the same position in that box. So this is a 2. This is a 3 because it's the same position in its own box, and this is a 7. 2, 3, 7 is increasing along the thermo. So that's how the rules have to work. And with that, this puzzle becomes solvable. Now, as I said, I am going to be following a script for this, because this puzzle is incredibly hard. When I first solved this, it took me over 2.5 hours to figure it out. Now, I was unwell and distracted at the time. That's no forgiving. I don't want you sitting here watching me struggle with this for hours. That is not an interesting video. When I did this for another puzzle, I got incredibly positive feedback that it was much more interesting just watching me present the solution than it was having me struggle with the puzzle. So I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to follow a script to show you how this puzzle works. Again, if you think that that is not a good way for me to do videos, please let me know, either in the comments below or message me directly. If you do like this format for more complex puzzles, again, please let me know, because that way I know that what I'm doing is of value to people. Anyway, on to this puzzle. And again, links to try this yourself, and I highly recommend it, both to the apps and to this puzzle on Logic Masters Germany will be below. So, the way we start this is with these long thermos, and what we actually want to do is we actually just want to mark the potential values on the 2 long thermos. So I'm doing this the way I do it. This may not be the best. What have I done? 9. That's an. So actually, no, this is just 2 values. So it's 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5. 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 8, and 8, 9. This one is 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. So it's 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, 4, 6. So what we end up with is those are the possible candidates on the thermo. Then we want to look at these 2 cells. So this going this way is a full thermo. So if we put a 5 here, this has to go 6, 7, 8, 9. But in this direction, there is a heat map thermo, and this is box 5 and 6. So if we put a 5 here, this becomes a 6, and that's just because of the thermo. But this would be a 6 in box 6, which would point to itself, and this would be a 5 in box 5, which would point to itself. So whatever we put at the bottom of this thermo, it would then go 6, 5, and they'd be pointing to themselves. So this would break the heat map thermo if this is a 5. So this cannot be a 5, that must be a 4. And because we've put a 4, the 4th way along a normal thermo, that becomes 3, that becomes 2, that becomes 1. We can take 3 out of there. Taking 3 out of there means that can't be a 4, that can't be a 5, that can't be a 6, and that can't be a 7. And already we've been able to make some progress. The next thing we do is we look at this cell. If we make that an 8, then it would be pointing at this cell, which is a predefined 6. So if this is an 8, the value for the heat map thermo would be a 6. And we would have to then map that to a 7, that to an 8, that to a 9, and that would have to map to something higher than a 9, which even with heat map thermos is not possible. That can't be an 8, and it must be a 9. The next place we look is this cell. And some of these deductions do require a little bit of looking ahead and thinking about it. And I'm jumping straight to the correct location. I'm aware of that. But as I said, this is going to be a scripted solve. Please provide comments if you think this is a bad way to do it. So if this becomes a 6, then this would be the 6. That would force that to be a 7 and that to be an 8. So this digit here would be a 6, forcing that to be an 8, and that would be looking at there, which means this digit here would be pointing to an 8 for this heat map thermo. So the value on this thermo would be an 8 because 6 here makes that a 7. That keeps selecting other cells. 6 here would make that a 7 and make that an 8. So that's an 8 on the thermo. And this cell would need to point to a 9. However, the only values this can be is 4 and 5. And if we look at those locations in box 4 and box 5, that can't be a 9 and that cannot be a 9 because there's already a 9 in the box. So if this is a 6, we cannot legally fill that cell on the heat map thermo. That has to be a 5. Once that's a 5, that has to be a 4. That can't be a 4. That can't be a 3. Okay. Now, once this is a 5, it's pointing to itself. So if we think about that on this thermo, this is the 5th position along this heat map thermo. So this must point to a 4, this must point to a 3, this must point to a 2, and this must point to a 1. So this must point to a 4, and it must do it either there or there, either of which look okay. This must point to a 3, and it must do it either there or there. And this one cannot be a 3, or we would be breaking the rules of Sudoku. So this must be a 7, and that must be the 3 because that's the same position in box 7. This must point to a 2, and that's either that box cell or that cell because it's the same cell in box 8 or box 9. There is already a 2 in box 8, so it can't be an 8. That must be a 9. That must be the 2. And whatever goes in here must point to a 1. This 9 is now pointing to, this 9 here is pointing at this cell. And we now have a 1 and a 2 in this cell. Now, if we look along here, then we can see that if this was a 9, which it is, we've got 8, 7, 6. This cannot be any higher than a 5. So this cell here must be no higher than a 5, and it cannot be a 1 or a 2. So this becomes a 3, a 4, or a 5 in this cell. But we can actually narrow that down further, because if we look at this, and if we remember this cell needed to point to a 4, and it's either there or there, because it must be in box 6 or 7 in that position. Whichever one of those is true, this cannot be a 4. And in fact, we know that's a 6 because there's a 7 on the thermo. I don't know why I didn't notice that. So we can place the 4 there, and that can't be a 4. So we've now actually got some digits in the box. Quite a few digits in the grid using the combination of the heat map thermos and the overlaid on top of the normal thermos. The concept of doing that, I wish I'd come up with it. I didn't. Zombie Hunter, very well done. So we've now narrowed that down. Now we want to look at, I believe, this cell. If this is a 6, and this is probably the trickiest step in the puzzle, if this is a 6, then that forces this to be a 7 and this to be an 8, just by normal thermo rules. So remember the grey thermo underneath. This becomes a 6, this becomes a 7, this becomes an 8. However, if that's the case, remember that these will be pointing down, and this will be a self-referential digit. So if this is a 6, then these digits here must be below 6 for the heat map thermo. But we know that this cannot be less than a 3. So if this is a 6, this is a 3, and these must go 4 and 5. So this will point to, this will be 6, 7, and 8, and the 7 will have to point to a 5, and the 8 will have to point at a 4. And that's the thermos going in 2 different directions. So the 8 would have to point to a 4 there, and the 7 would have to point to a 5 there. Now I'm actually going to put these in just to show you. So if we put a 4 there and a 5 there, we've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in row 7, and that cell, which is lower down the thermo than that 5, has no possible fill. There is nothing we can put lower down this grey thermo in that cell. We cannot put a 4 that combination in. So if this goes 6, 7, 8, that forces a 4 there, a 5 there, and that cell is broken. This cannot be a 6. This must be a 5. That is quite tricky, but that is probably the trickiest step in this puzzle. You can put in a 5 here. Now, this has given us a little bit of stuff that we can look at. But the next thing I think we want to do is probably fill out the candidates on this thermo. That can be a 9, that can be an 8, that can be a 7, that can't be 6, 5, or 4, or 3, so this is 2 or 1. So we're now counting up. This can't be a 2, it can be a 3, can't be 4, can't be 5, can't be 6, so this is 3, 7. This can't be 4 or 5, so this is 6, 7, or 8, and this can be 7, 8, or 9. So this thermo is more restricted than it looks. If we were to put a 7 here, this thermo would be forced to be maximums, 7, 8, 9. And if that's a 7 and that's an 8, there is nothing you can put in that cell because you'll already have a 7 in a row and an 8 in a column. That can't be 7, that must be a 3. And that's just a really nice normal thermo deduction in the middle of the frenetic heat wave that Zombie Hunter has given us. And I will admit, that little deduction there took me ages to find the first time I did this puzzle, which was possibly 2 weeks ago now, but it did take me a long time to find that. Now, the next thing we want to do is look at the rest of these boxes. So, for example, this cell here is much more restricted than it looks. I mean, it's got a lot pointing at it and it's on a thermo. So if we look at the values that it can be, this can be 2, can't be 3, 4, 5, can be 6, can't be 7, and it can't be 8 because there are 2 digits higher than it on the thermo. So this is either 2 or 6. Again, can't be 3, 4, or 5. Can't be 1 because it's further along a thermo. Can't be 7. And if it was 8, we'd have 9 and 10, and that doesn't work. So this is limited to 2 or 6. But this is on the 4th position of a heat map thermo. So this must be at least a 4. And if we don't know anything about this position in box 6, but we know a lot about that position in box 2. And we know it must be 2 or 3. So if this is a 2, this heat map thermo is broken. That must be a 6. This pointing to a 6 is pointing at this cell. So this 4th position along this heat map thermo now here must be right there. So this digit must be at least a 4, but it can't be a 4, it can't be a 5, it can't be a 6, it can't be a 7, and it can't be a 9. That digit is forced to be an 8, and that resolves a whole heap of stuff. There's possibly even a little bit more we can do here. So that break, that sort of, we're well past the break-in, but as you can see, all of these interactions and figuring out where to look is definitely one of the key tricks to making this puzzle work. So in this box, we are missing 1, 2, 7, and 8, but there's already a 7 and 8 in this row. So we can put in the 1, 2, 7, 8s, and there's a 7 there now. So that becomes an 8, that becomes a 7. We knew that this, because this is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, this has to point to a 1. We can put a 1 in here. We know that 1 has to go into one of those cells. I'm just doing normal Sudoku. I'm a little off script at the moment because there's just normal Sudoku to do. These are 1, 2, 3, without that one being 3. And what else am I missing here? We're probably okay for now. So let's go back and have a look. If we look here, now we know this is now pointing to a 7. This is pointing to a 6. So this is pointing to itself. So this needs to be lower than a 6, and it can't be a 1, 2, 3. So this has to be 4 or 5. So this digit, less than 6, 1, 2, 3, 5, this has to be a 4. So that's forced that digit. And then this must be less than 4, and it's in box 9, and it's that cell there, less than a 4. That forces that to be a 3. That becomes a 1. That becomes a 2. That becomes a 3. That becomes a 1. That forces, because of those 3s, it forces a 3 into that position. These two cells are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 8. There's already an 8 in this box. That becomes a 2. That becomes an 8. The only thing missing from that box is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is a 9. There is a 6 up here, so I can put a 6 in here. Let's see what it says over here. This is a triple, so I'm going to put it in. This is 1, 2, and 4. That can't be 1 or 4, so that becomes a 2. There is a 1, 4 here. 2 has to go in one of those two. We've got the 3, 4. I'm probably missing some basic Sudoku here, but yep. So 6 must go here. That gives us a triple up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a 7, 8, 9. Can't put a 9 in there. Yeah, I think that's about it for now. So, yep, the 7 has placed that 1. So, this is pointing to here, which is a 2. This is pointing here, which is an 8. So this has to point to... So this is 8, 7, 6. So this must point to something that is a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6. So what digits can it be? So 1, 2, 3, 4, it can be 5, can't be 6, 7, 8. It can only be 5 or 9. And it must be between 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, this location in 5 is 8, so that is not possible. If I was to put an 8 here, then this would go 8, 9, and that would be broken. So this cannot be a 5, and it can't be 1, 2, 3, 4, can't be 6, can't be 7 or 8. This must be a 9. And therefore, we know that this cell, which has to be higher than 2, it has to be 3, 4, 5, or 6, because this is the 8. And if we look here, we've got a 3, 4, 6 in the row. This becomes a 5. That leaves a 7 and 8 left in this row. Remember, this is pointing to a 5. This is pointing to an 8. So this must be a 6, 7, 6 or a 7. And if we put an 8 in there, it would point at that cell and be a 2, which doesn't work. This must be a self-referential 7, and that becomes an 8. These are 2, 5, and 8. I'm not sure if I should be doing... I'm not sure if I should be doing any more. Okay, here we go. So this 8 is on this heat map thermo. So this is a 4 and this is a self-referential 8. So the end of this heat map thermo, which can't be an 8 because it has to be less than the 8, so we get the 8 here, is a 2 or a 5, and it must point to a 9. The 2 doesn't point to there, can't point to a 9 because there's already a 9 in the box. So this becomes a 5 and this becomes a 2. Means that 2 is up here somewhere. Can I resolve more of this? I thought I could at this point. Okay, so in this column, we need 2, 3, 4, and 9, and there's a 2, 3 in this box. So we put a 2, 3 up here, we put a 4, 9 down here. That means this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a 7, 8, which we can resolve because of the 8 already in this row. So this is a 4, 9. Now this is pointing at this cell, so this is a 9, that's fine. This is pointing at this cell, which we do not know for sure what it is. And this is pointing either at a 9, which it can't do, so that becomes a 4. Because if this was a self-referential 9, there is nothing higher than that we can put up the thermo. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is 4, 7, which is resolved by the 4 in box 2. These are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9 goes right in the middle because we've already got 2 9s. This becomes a 1. This becomes a 5. And now we've dealt with most of the bottom of the grid. And we've just got a little bit more to do. And to be honest, at this point, my script kind of runs dry because it says the rest of it is fairly straightforward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8 to go in here, which means this cannot be a 7, which it couldn't be anyway. Actually, it can't be an 8. This is forced to be a 9. So this is an 8. This is a 7. This has to point to something lower than a 7. And this is either that cell, or that cell. So it can't be a 7, and we can take the 7 out of there. These are 1 and 4, which is not resolved. These are 1, 7, and 8, which are not fully resolved. These are 5 and 6, which are not resolved. This is 2 and 3. Nothing is jumping out at me. I probably need to look at the... Well, we can't put a 1 this far down a thermo. This is a 2 or a 3, so this has to be a 1, just looking at the grey thermo, which means that's the 4. There is no 1 here anymore, so that becomes a 1. Now, if we look at this heat map thermo, this is a 3. This has to point to something higher than a 3, which is either a 5 or an 8. This will point to either a 9 or a 3, but this could only point to a 5 or an 8. So if this was a 3, it would be broken. That must be a 2, which means either of these are possible, but that makes that a 3, makes that a 2, makes that a 3. We now need to put 1 in one of those 2 cells because of those ones looking into the box. I'm probably missing something basic here, but that's okay. I'm not too upset about that yet. I won't throw a temper tantrum or anything, I promise. Maybe. 3 in this column only has 1 position. It can't go in either of those, and 3 is knocked out of that cell, so 3 must go here. So this is a 1, 2, 4, and there is a 1 and a 2 in the row already. That becomes a 4, that becomes a 1, that becomes a 2, that becomes a 4. This is now the only place left for a 1. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We need 5 and 6 in those two cells. This is a 5, 6 pair, so we can take 5 out of there. And we've got a whole bunch of, this is a 5, 6. I can take 5 out of there. That's a 7, 8, so that becomes a 5. We can take 9 out of there. This 7, 8 puts 9 into there. And we've got a whole bunch of what would be deadly patterns, except they're going to get resolved, I'm fairly certain, because I've seen this before, by this heat map thermo. So this 4 is pointing to here, giving us a 1. Okay. This is a 5 or a 6 pointing to here or here. Well, the 5 would point to a 1. And if we went 1, 1, that would be a broken thermo. This must point to a 6, making that a 5, making that a 6, making that a 5. Now we just need to resolve the final step. This is a 2. So this must point to something higher than a 2. It's that cell or that cell. If this was an 8, it would point to a 1. This thermo would go 1, 2, 1, which is not valid. This must be a 7. This must be an 8. This must be a 7. This must be an 8. This must be a 7. And with putting the 8 into the grid, we have finished Forecast Heatwave by Zombie Hunter. This puzzle blew my mind when I first saw it. The fact that he was able to take the idea that I was unable to make work and turn it into this puzzle, it's great. And apparently a couple of other phenomenal setters have picked up the idea and have started playing with it as well. It is my dream that one day someone will try and set a Psycho Killer cage or a Hunter cage, which are the other rule sets that I've been playing with, and do something with those. I've also been playing with other constraints. I've actually tried setting a couple of arrow puzzles using the same sort of constraint. And again, have not been able to make them work. I'm not a strong enough setter yet to be able to do it, but I'm still playing with them. But this puzzle blew my mind. It is, I know I keep saying that and I'm sorry, but it is just phenomenal in taking the idea and running with it to a level. I'm really, really happy that this puzzle exists in ways I cannot express. And seeing heat map thermos used in such a glorious way. Please, I like the video if you like the video, but please tell some, if you seek out Zombie Hunter, if you see him on Cracking the Cryptic or anything, just call him out and say that this was such a good puzzle if you think it was, because yeah, he deserves the credit. It's such a good puzzle. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the format of the video. I really needed to do this puzzle as a thank you to Zombie Hunter. If no one else really likes it, but he does, then it's been worth my time. This needed to be seen by someone, and I really wanted this to exist. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to show you another puzzle sometime soon. Thank you.